Pucks with Haggs is brought to you by FanDuel, the exclusive wagering partner of the CLNS Media Network.
And welcome to another edition of the Pucks with Haggs podcast. I believe this is the 20th episode of the Pucks with Haggs podcast. Let's cut the ribbons, send out the balloons, have big party celebrations. First thing I want to do before I introduce our guest today, Mick Colageo, is, as always, give a little love to our sponsors. First, we've got FanDuel Sportsbook, the exclusive wagering partner of the CLNS network. We're always happy that they're riding shotgun with us. And the other one today, as always, look at this, Factor Meals. Not only a pitchman, also a client. I had the, let's see, what was it? The Indian butter chicken for lunch today. Fantastic, delicious. Took 2 minutes in the microwave. Dietitian approved. It's cooked by chefs, 2 minutes in the micro, no fuss, no muss. It was delicious. So go to Factor Meals, use Haggs50 code to get 50% off. Thank you, Factor Meals, for being a sponsor. And now let's get to our guest from the Standard Times, longtime hockey writer, Mick Colageo. And today we're going to talk about Patrice Bergeron in light of the retirement announcement, in light of the press conference that he had with all the reporters at the Garden on Wednesday. And really, I wanted Mick on because Mick was one of those people on the ground floor with number 37, just like me and just like a few lucky select others on the Bruins beat that were actually there covering Patrice Bergeron in 03-04 when he was an 18-year-old kid, fresh from Quebec. And just Mick, just what was going through your mind when you watched the press conference, when you heard he was going to retire? What sort of were your immediate thoughts just about, having covered this guy, Hall of Famer, from the beginning of his career to the end?
I think watching Bergie play center for the Providence Bruins in the lockout year and looking forward to him coming back to Boston and that role, which didn't really come to fruition until the trade, Joe Thornton.
Yep.
It started out on the wing again. And, as the Bruins were trying to somehow put together a team. And I think that missing the NHL, Bergeron sort of became the epicenter of that by watching him in Providence in the middle, negotiate the middle of the rink, getting to see how good he is as a centerman, seeing the chemistry he had with Brad Boyes, and just looking at the way that he was coming along and really gaining an appreciation, because he's not that player who jumps over the boards and the first two strides you say, oh my God. He
Right.
isn't like, that's not what he does. He wins you over through a series of games of watching him think the game, play the game, decide how to play the game, both sides of the puck with his teammates. And it just all grew from there. So it's just been so many ups and downs and so much life lived with this guy, and including the career-threatening concussion that he sustained in the first Claude Julien year early on. There's just so much there that happened that led up to the Stanley Cup. And when it finally came, it just seemed like his role just grew from there. And I think that I just feel like this guy's sort of been part of my life.
Yep.
Just like when you snip off 20 years and you say, okay, I've been obsessed with the Bruins since the mid 60s, right before Orr got there. I started really getting into it, and hockey fan first, black and gold bleeder second. And, but Bergeron's just one of those rare players who's come along and sort of just become synonymous with my sense of who the Bruins are and who they are in my life.
Yep.
So for me, letting go of Bergie at this point, it's going to leave a huge hole, and I'm not sure it's fully sunk in yet.
No, it's going to sink in when we go to training camp and we're in the locker room and he's not there, and he's
right.
He's not the guy that's present whenever, we have questions about the team, whether things are going well or things are going bad. Like, that's when it's going to hit. And that's going to be weird for me. Like, my first year covering the team was his rookie season, that 03-04 season. So I have not known what it's like to cover the Boston Bruins when Patrice Bergeron's not there, even if he was a younger player and and this is part of what I guess I think of whenever I think of him as an elder statesman, a father of four, one of the faces of the NHL, a Hall of Famer, is I always think back to that rookie year. And I think back to a shy kid with peach fuzz that really was not sure about his English at all. It really didn't say much at all. And was really, just sort of happy to be there. Nobody thought a second round pick that year was going to make the team. And all of a sudden
totally caught me off guard. I wasn't ready for that. I had to be told, hey, he's really good. You should watch him. He's going to make the team. Really? And it took me time to figure out why he's so good.
That's unheard of. Like, what second round pick makes the NHL as an 18-year-old after he's drafted? Like, that doesn't happen, that's a rarity to see something like that happen, especially, a kid that you really haven't heard much about. But like, I also distinctly remember Mike Sullivan, whenever you would ask him about Bergeron that entire year, he would get that funny smirk on his face. Like he knew something. He was in on a secret that, nobody else knew about, like how good that kid was going to be. He knew immediately and early and often sang his praises. And, you could tell he saw what he was going to turn into if he was like that as an 18-year-old kid. And, now he's become obviously legendary player, Stanley Cup winner, record holder in the NHL, Hall of Famer, like all that stuff.
Medalist.
Yeah. But I think Sully.
It's funny how it took people in different layers, it takes them to come around. I remember so many people putting together their Team Canada for the Olympics and having Bergeron outside the top 12.
Yeah.
And they're surprised, they're utter shock that he's on Crosby's line. And then the revelation that they got watching, and I remember Damian Cox tweeting, Toronto Star columnist, tweeting his amazement. Bergeron always makes the right play.
Yeah. He was just discovering it.
Until you watch him a lot, you don't really get it.
Right.
And then you start wanting to only view the Bruins through that prism. Now we have to view it outside of that prism. That's going to be hard. It's going to remind me what it was like as a fan to think of the Bruins after Bobby Orr, after Ray Bourque. Certain people that come along that are so impactful and so consistent and so much smack in the middle of the game. They're the engine that runs the game. And they're the engine that provides the team its identity. And then they're gone. And now there's a reinvention that must occur. Yeah. Is there a passing of the torch? Is there a mantle? Is there a culture? Can it continue? Of course, it always has. But when I think of how rudderless the Bruins were after Ray Bourque, it concerns me with this guy. Not because there aren't other great guys and players and leaders and stuff that are deserving of carrying it forward. It's just that this guy was so impactful, so consistent, so passionate, so present that it's just it's hard to imagine the Bruins without number 37 out there. Now, been through this before. The sun will come up. The black and gold will take the ice. They'll have a centennial season, and we'll. I'm grateful to have lived long enough to have be in a position here where I'm anticipating this next difficult phase of Bruins hockey.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting. I mean, from Bergeron's perspective, just first of all, at the press conference, that seemed like a guy totally at ease with his decision, completely happy, like at peace, like knows what he's doing, knows the decision he's making, has thought it through, and is completely okay with it. And I thought it was interesting. That it sounds like he's going to be a little removed from the Bruins situation next year, as he probably will have to be, kind of coming to terms with the retirement and all that. I don't think we're going to see him much at the Garden. I don't think he's going to watch many games. He'll maybe watch a few, but I think he's going to go pursue other things like he's wanted to for a long time. And I thought all of that stuff, when he was talking about that and being excited about other things in his life, and obviously spending way more time with his family, having 4 kids that are like age 7 and under, that stuff I thought was really interesting to me. Like, he knew it was time, and he was totally okay with it. When you talk to other players like Sean Thornton, who was like, I remember him saying they're going to have to tear the jersey off of me, like, to keep me from playing anymore. And ultimately that kind of did happen for him, where there's just going to be no room for him anywhere. But a completely different side of the coin for Bergeron that I think speaks to like the person that he is. And part of what made him great was his approach to all of these things.
Yeah, I think so too. He was completely immersed. He allowed the game to come to him and sort of reinvented himself. There are great creative players who come along in life, whether it's Adam Oates or Mark Savard, or, players who invent hockey as they see it, as they play it. They wind up impacting the game, and other players learn from them and take new things. So it isn't just he does all these things well and checks all these boxes because this is what scouts want. This guy got out there and felt the game. And I think because of that, we enjoyed an era of Bruins hockey where we could sort of feel it with him. And
his game, I mean, we talk about his game and we all agree, not the fastest guy, not the strongest guy, although he won almost all of his battles. So there was definitely plenty of strength there, but we're not talking about a big hitter. And certainly he modified his game where he really wasn't hitting much of anybody after that hit he took in 07-08 that wiped him out for the season. And that was a kind of a big transformation point for him in the kind of the way he played, no question about it. But we're not talking about, the most physical guy, the fastest guy, the most skilled guy in a lot of ways. But I think he's had a huge influence on players in Boston, youth players, and something he wanted to be a role model for on and off the ice. On the ice, like, it was about playing the right way. It was about hustling on the back check. It was about paying attention to details in the faceoff circle. It was about practicing the spots you were going to get to in the offensive zone where you were going to do your damage and becoming perfect and, 100% deadly from those areas, from the slot when he was shooting the puck. But like, you see generations now of kids that play and they play center and they play the game the right way, and they're not cheating the zone and they're not flying out and they're not taking off going the other way when the puck is in their zone because they watched Patrice Bergeron, play his entire career doing things the right way and making sure he was playing at both ends. And like, that's going to be part of his legacy, is the amount of local players that have come out of New England that play the Bergeron way because they watched him for so long, with my son being one of them now. He plays center and he is a two-way player that plays defense because he watched 37 the last 4 or 5 years.
Take your swing at betting MLB on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets, up to $200. That's right. Just bet $20 and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 you could use to bet against the Red Sox because you think they're going to lose most nights. It's on a safe app that's secure and really easy to use. And when you win, you get paid instantly. That's why we love FanDuel Sportsbook. So there's really no better place than to use it, the exclusive wagering partner of the CLNS network. Sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/Boston to get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/Boston. And you'll land up to $200 in bonus bets based on the first bet that you give them.
I think if there's a statue for Bergeron, it should have two parts. One is him out on the ice playing, and the other is kid sitting on the bench, watching, and his father's hand on his shoulder and pointing.
Yep.
And this is, such a great part of the game that's going to be missed here. The Bruins have been blessed to have some really incredible and diverse personalities reinventing the game of hockey before our very eyes. I remember Cap Rader calling me up one morning after he was at a Pete Bruins game scouting for the San Jose Sharks. And he's like, "Hey, I was just there watching this kid, Krejci, him and Versteeg. They're going to be good. They're going to be NHLers. That Krejci, he can play right now." And, he wound up getting his cup of coffee and got, knocked into Palookaville by Adam Bear, staring down at the puck in the crease. But the next year he triumphantly began his NHL career. And he went on to become a guy who led the playoffs in scoring in 2 different years. Andrei Kopitar, I think, is the only other one to do that in this era. Maybe Crosby did, I'm not sure. But to have two guys like that who sat kitty corner in the old version of the TD Garden Fleet Center locker room, they each had a corner of it. They shared that corner of the locker room from 6 feet in on either side. It was those two guys, but they were never on the ice together unless the Bruins needed a goal with a minute left in a game. And other than that, but the 2/3 of every hockey game, the opponents had to look at one of those two guys. And that is really the basis for the success of the Boston Bruins ever since Marc Savard's career was unfairly and criminally derailed.
Yep.
That's really been the foundational aspect, basis of the Bruins. And now they go from having both of those guys this past season, last season, whatever you want to start calling it now, and now nobody's talking about number 46, by the way. That situation has not officially got a bow on it. But
No.
For all of the speculation, there's been a lot of assumption, I think, tacit assumption that Krejci's not coming back. And, it was a sad ending for both of those guys. It'd be pretty cool if Krejci did now, but who knows what'll happen.
Well, I think there's even a scenario with Krejci where, maybe he starts the year not playing. Maybe he recognizes that 82 games is too much to play at this point. And he was banged up at the end of the year, going down the stretch and in the playoffs. And, as I've said several times on here, his family was living in South Carolina and he was away from his kids for, weeks and months at a time. And his wife, that's had to be incredibly difficult. So maybe it becomes, he sees where the Bruins are at around Christmas time and, signs and comes on for the second half of the year. Maybe that is still a remote possibility if he doesn't decide to retire. And maybe that's something the Bruins can, sort of hang their hat on or have hopes for, kind of like they were hoping Bergeron was going to have second thoughts about retiring and, get out on the ice one time and say, oh, I miss it. I want to come back. But I think those are
not to leave the door open.
No, of course.
You got to do it. But at the same time,
But I think they're full steam ahead on whatever plan B is because they know that, plan A for both of them is likely not to happen. So what's interesting is, how much do we read into the way that Coyle and Zacha played in the Florida series when Bergeron and Krejci were out as to, what they might be capable of if they're given the reins as, center one and center two to start this year, or, how much do you feel like they need to make a move for another, number one center, a legit number one center that's going to be able to give you something of, what Patrice Bergeron gave, even if nobody's ever going to fill those skates.
Yeah, tough question. Given the fact that they were so handcuffed to deal with it the year that they would need to do it the most. And as you've alluded on my prior appearances here, that the cap will go up next season.
Yep.
But this year, the flat cap has got the Bruins in a situation where they were always going to slide Zacha over. Haula, even though he was scratched the same night as Jake DeBrusk, and he also picked up his game after that and really became a useful player for the Bruins and made him marketable in that deal for Zacha. And as the Bruins, looking back at that infamous draft to pluck the number 6 overall pick, a guy who had torched the Bruins in a couple of situations and impressed upon them, this guy's got some big boy hockey ability. He skates, he makes the rink look short, he makes zones look short. Zacha can pass the puck, he can shoot the puck. And so, it was, if the formula could ever work for a guy one season to say, okay, you're going to spend your season skating with David Krejci, and half the time you're going to be watching Patrice Bergeron. So you have, 40 minutes a game here where you're going to be going to school. And when that's over, I think it was always that we want to see Zacha's upside. They got him for this purpose. Sweeney loves his players who can play more than one position, but in particular, he was anticipating this scenario.
Yeah.
And certainly the possibility thereof, and got Zacha with that in mind. It'd be nice if Matthew Poitras was a couple more years along. Can he do it at 19, if you put him between Marchand and DeBrusque, only Camp will, tell us whether and then those 9 fateful games, whether or not that's a scenario we can realistically hope for. But boy, could they could sure use to have a Barry Peterson scenario like 81, 82 and have somebody pop like that and have an internal solution. That would be awesome.
It would be. I mean, having watched Petra at development camp, I'm not sure that's quite where he is yet. Just, he wasn't dominant to the point where I'm going to give him top 6 minutes at center on an NHL team. That's exactly what they need, is for something like that to happen. Because in the ideal world, as you're alluding to, I think Zacha is your number 2 center, and Coyle would be ideally on a really good team, a number 3 center, as he's been, the last few years for the Bruins, rather than once you talk about Zacha number 1, Coyle number 2, or Coyle number 1, Zacha number 2, you're talking about at least one player sort of playing up too far.
In the driver there isn't really, to me, whether you're 1 or 2 as much as it is who your line mates, what's the right matchups, what's the top 6 best, how does it best work? I remember in the Julian era, it didn't matter who Bergey's line mates were, because he knew he was going to get a great 3-zone 200-foot game out of him no matter what. So he had to make sure he took care of Savard, then take care of Krejci, and then Bergeron gets what's ever left and gets his top 9 minutes in his shutdown role. And that obviously evolved as as the seasons went along, and Bergey's role morphed into a much more of an ozone start guy. It's that's one, like you're talking about doing a Patrice Bergeron retrospective today. To me, that's more his legacy than the Selke legacy, is that Bergeron has been able to continue improving himself in different ways and morphing his game to meet the needs of his team. I remember he practicing that one-timer, before Pasta came along, and Bergey's really trying to get that one-timer down, and he wound up starting to do it. And it sort of became his role for a little while. But
he perfected the bumper position, though, on the power play. He perfected that, once that honed in on, that's what he was doing. And the shot from the bumper position became deadly and accurate. And he would pick up pucks no matter what the pass or the puck that was coming at him, and he would fire off a shot that always surprised the goalie. Like he turned into a huge weapon.
He never stops trying to figure out how to be better.
Yep.
So Bergey's going to have to do something with all that energy when he, has his convulsions and starts breathing the air of, I'm not a hockey player anymore. Then he's going to have to start figuring out where to put all that.
Yes. Yeah. Good luck. Maybe he's going to run the marathon like Z. He joked about that yesterday. Maybe that'll become something, a short-term goal for him, but God bless him. And, getting back to what we were talking about with Zacha and Coyle, I am heartened to a degree by what I saw in the series against Florida. They had Florida on the ropes with those 2 as your top 2 centers. They played well, and they fit in with the wingers, and, both of them are good 2-way players. The one thing about Zacha that concerns you is, the face-offs and some of the other things that he's not even close to, Bergeron level with. And, he'll have Chris Kelly and guys like that there to help him after sort of going to school and watching Bergeron and Krejci last year. But, there's some level of encouragement that those guys could be able to handle it, at least for a little while. And, at some point, I don't know that this is going to happen in the summer. I don't know this is going to happen in training camp, but, there are going to be centers available in trade. Elias Lindholm, Calgary Flames, is I most likely going to get moved, I would think, at some point. And his cap number is actually not that bad. It would be natural to try to
makes
fit that
him so attractive that's going to be a motherload of a compensation.
Of course. And that's like where the rubber meets the road for the Bruins is, do they have the assets to be able to make a deal like that? And, Scheifele's another guy, obviously, that's been mentioned a lot. I don't know that he's necessarily a great fit, because he's more of just a pure offensive number 1 center. I don't know that he brings a lot of the 2-way stuff that Bergeron brings to the table. And certainly, he's not kind of a leader. Like, I think he was one of the people that is part of this Winnipeg situation that has exasperated Bonus and Paul Maurice before him.
That's the problem is if you're not sure where's the baby and where's the bathwater in Winnipeg, then you better steer clear and do it a different way. You got to be real sure about the player you get.
Yep, and I think that's where Lindholm seems to be a solid guy. My expectation would be that that's the number one guy the Bruins are going to look at if they want to trade for somebody from the outside or try to bring somebody in. Is that kind of a guy that's a pretty good two-way player, good center, can do things offensively and defensively, is on a good cap number right now, and seemingly is part of the veteran contingent that seems to want out of Calgary.
I look at him as the forward aspect of the defenseman that went from Arizona to Ottawa. That kid
Chikrin,
that he he was at such a favorable cap number that you knew that this trade ain't going to happen overnight, and whoever does it is gonna pay a king's ransom. And
but Chikrin was signed to a longer term though. Lindholm is going into the last year of his deal, I believe. So I think
so. But then so you're going to pay a lot, and then you're going to risk it, or are you going to have sort of agreement? Because it looks to me like there are a couple deadline acquisitions in this past season where teams got assurances that they were going to be able to negotiate.
Yeah, well, Taylor Hall was one of those too when the Bruins traded for him. I think the assumption was if things worked out, they were going to sign him to an extension after that.
Right.
And Don Sweeney seems to do his due diligence with that stuff. So I would assume all that is going to be sort of at least put away to a degree before they would make a significant move like that. But they've also painted themselves into a corner by not having any first or second round picks until like 2026, and not having the greatest prospect system right now, where the top guys they're going to be relying on to come in and help them. Getting back to Bergeron, what are your favorite moments from the time that you watched him? I appreciate the shout out to Brad Boys back in the day. He and Boys and Marco Sturm were dynamite in those first couple of years together when they played.
Well, the first one.
Bergeron had one of his best offensive seasons coming out of that year in Providence. He had over 30 goals and 70 points.
I got a chance to ask Sturm once, what was the difference? No, it was Brad Boys. I asked, what was the difference between the hockey that you guys played as a line with Sully in 05-06 and what happened in 06-07 with Louis, where the plus minuses, Bergeron had like an aberration of minus that was put him at or near the bottom of the league to a point that it probably eclipses all the minuses of his cumulative total of his life in that one season. And Boys told me that Dave Lewis wanted them all spread out around the rink, whereas their game was much more late 70s, early 80s Bruins hockey, where the passes were real short. Actually, Montgomery very much coached. It's a short, accessible, as Andy Brickley loves to say, makes himself available kind of passing outlets. And this was sort of how the Bruins continued their kind of like the last play of a football game. There's always somebody right there to lateral to. And this was kind of how they played under Sully. Louis wanted to try to capitalize on the two-line pass rule and all of that. And it just completely backfired on them. They didn't have the team chemistry overall to cope with, especially on the defensive end. So
no, I mean, when you see Chara struggle,
those guys had the wheels either, because really Boys wasn't really a fast skater. Berge could he was a strong skater on the forecheck, but he wasn't the kind of guy whose speed was going to make up for anything. And that line kind of got chewed up under Louis, because that was the wrong way to play.
Yeah, Stern brought the speed, I think, on that line when they did get going. He had pretty good speed, but like in general, I mean, Louis was a disaster anyway, right? We know that to be the case when he was pulling out basketballs at practice on off days in Carolina or wherever they were, and having Savard and Chara like shoot baskets instead of working on the ice, and all the stuff that was going on. I mean, Chara was horrendous that first year, and I think it was a lot of guys that were trying to do too much too.
Well, that was what Peter Chiarelli said about Zdeno Chara, that year, the first year, he was trying to do so much to live up to the new role he had. That when Claude came in, he calmed all that down, and also, I mean, he had a better team to work with, which allowed him to, then it progressed, kept tweaking personnel, and got better as it went.
But there's so many instances with Bergeron of little snapshots of his greatness, or times when you knew he was going to come through, whether it was, that hat trick in the final regular season game a couple of years ago when he got to 400 career goals, when we weren't sure if he was coming back for another year, and he managed to get it just in case. Obviously he came back for a following year, but you kind of just got that feeling as that game was going on that he's going to get it right now. That the Winter Classic in Notre Dame, when he, kind of turned that game with a back check that went down to the puck, and then the puck goes down the other end and turns into a goal. Even other things, the 2013 Stanley Cup final, when he played through that game where he was basically in a car crash, and would manage to make it through.
Yeah, that was a string of injuries. It all started with a late hit by Michael Frolik. Bergeron had given up the puck. He was going toward the west end of the garden, so it's first or third period. But he had given up the puck, and he was about 10 feet, I guess, from the sideboards. And Frolik came in from like side, sort of behind, sort of beside, and caught him unawares, like a second late, kind of a Trent McCleary hit. And Bergie went. He just wasn't braced right for it, and he wound up getting his shoulder crunched against the dasher, against the kick plate, and now he's trying to protect that injury in the opposite corner of the rink, and he gets hit by Hossa, and it just keeps going and going and going, and it just unraveled on him and the Bruins as they got Hossa back in that series in Game 4, and that was a pivotal game. And but yeah, but the guts that he showed, like you say. That is incredible. And I also think of, he's going up against Crosby and in that series before that.
Yep.
And credit to Claude for acknowledging the reality of how close that series was, even though it went 4 games. First words out of his mouth at the podium, that was not a sweep. And but really, Tuukka was what made that a sweep. And but Bergie going up against Crosby and taking on really hockey's premier forward and beating him, I thought was pretty impressive. I think of that. I think of even Taves. You could tell that even though they won that 13 series, that Winter Classic at Notre Dame, that time where Bergie scores that goal and Taves comes in from the side and gives him a real cross check in the ribs.
Yeah,
and Bergie just turns around and looks at him. You could just see that there was definitely that these guys hated playing against Bergeron. They hated it. He just would drive them crazy.
Yep, but they respected him because they were all the same kind of players too. It was like that small sort of fraternity of Taves, Crosby, Bergeron, guys like that are very similar players, the highest
Kopitar,
of competitors.
Yeah.
Kopitar is another one too. That's a lot of the stuff that's going to be missed with him, along with, some of the great stories of his leadership. The one I remember is Jamel Smith, who played 3 games with the Bruins, came up on the waivers from Dallas Stars. They had injuries. They needed to bring a guy in, barely played with them. But just in that time, Bergeron, picks up on something, not quite being right or feeling like something was wrong with him, or, he wasn't feeling great. Something was going on. And he's just started talking to him about it. And it turned into Jamel Smith talking to Max Offerberger and, getting some professional people to talk to because, mentally he just wasn't feeling good. And that's the kind of leadership that he had that goes above and beyond the rah-rah stuff. He was not a rah-rah guy for the most part. He got better at that as he was, and not in a theatrical way, but just in an effective way as he got older, just sort of talking, being a leader, public speaking, all that stuff. I think he got better at as he was going on, which is certainly part of leadership. But his genuine care for people, even a guy that played 3 games and really wasn't around and had a lasting impact on that person's life. I mean, that kind of speaks to who he was beyond the ice and beyond, all the accolades and the awards that he won.
Yep. I think of that. I think of obviously the Game 7 shorty near the end of the second period in Vancouver. That's just sensing that opportunity while
and the audacity of the Canucks biting his finger, right? In Game 1 too.
Well, Yeah, you have your characters in this game, and Mark Recchi certainly exploited that situation for all he could. He had the experience to understand that this is currency.
Oh yeah, are
So,
you kidding me?
yeah, it's just personal experience with Bergie too. There was a relationship I was in where I wound up having the closest thing I've ever had to a parental role in somebody's life. And it was a 5-year-old who I pretty much indoctrinated into becoming a Bergeron fanatic. First explained to her that, Leah, this is where, see number 37, he's always in the middle. He's always in the circle. And she really got really into it. And that year, and one of the things that happened in her elementary or first grade was the teacher asked the children to please, write down somebody that you would like to meet. And she wrote down Patrice Bergeron. The teacher collects the papers and says, "Who's Patrice Bergeron?" And I granted, I get it. Everything was Patriots and Red Sox at the time. I know that. The freaking State House, puts out a banner in 2008, "Go Celtics," and the Bruins are like, "Hey, we're over here," And, I mean, it was always like that, and until the Bruins won. They weren't treated with any fairness by what I like to call the 3-sport media. Well, the culture, once the Patriots got really good, once the Red Sox broke through and that happened, and we have a whole generation of people for whom those are the two big teams, it's really an uphill climb for the Bruins and the Celtics. And the Celtics got there first, God bless them, and the Bruins found their way. And Bergeron was so central to that. And so, upon, the teacher saying this and her having to explain to the teacher, he plays for the Bruins. I wound up talking to Bergie and telling him the story, and he agreed to meet her.
That's
so
awesome.
Early on in the sequel season, the 11-12 season, I brought her in. Now, the relationship, we had broken up by this time. So that was terribly awkward, but we followed through on it, and she got to meet Bergie and do the Facebook photos and all of that stuff. And, and it's a great moment in her life to look back on. And, from when she was like 5 years old or 6 years old. So I think she turned 6 that year. It's just, but he was the kind of guy who just, was so intuitive to just understand that this is, to me, it's like a million years for my brain to think, go bother this guy. Because I grew up a fanatic, I got Jerry Cheever's autograph in 1970, Bobby Orr's that same year. Espo, so for me, once you're come over to the dark side and do what we do, we're talking to these guys all the time, and they become regular people to us. Yep. And so the first thing we think of is the thrill that get reminded every once in a while what a thrill it is for other people to meet them and enjoy that kind of vicariously, to see that, the joy that some people have and how nervous they are and stuff, and these guys are just trying to get through it and be nice because they generally are. They're the greatest guys ever. Hockey players are awesome. And, so just being around Bergie for some of that stuff and just doing this one thing because it wasn't about me. It was very difficult for me to do, actually, given So, but thanks to Eric Tosi and for helping me with it. But Bergie, he showed up after practice one day and met us in the concourse and signed a few things and talked. And it was that's him,
Yep, that is absolutely him. And that doesn't surprise me at all because I all hockey players are good to deal with, right? I mean, almost all uniformly. But like Bergeron and Marchand especially really seem to understand the impact they have on others and understand the responsibility that goes along with, being the people that they are, the players that they are, sort of role models. Like it was funny to me. I remember the Bruins do those those fan captains or whatever, not the playoff ones, but the little kids that go out on the ice with the players, during the starting lineup and the anthems and all that.
Yeah.
They've been doing that the last couple of years. And, I remember, I think this was a couple of years ago. I remembered watching. It was towards the beginning of the year. It was one of the first times they'd done it. And the kids started skating sort of when they were getting ready to start the game, it looked like the kid didn't quite know what was going on, where to go.
Oh yeah, just go around with the team like after
but you see Bergeron come over and Marchand and both take care of the kid, pat him on the head, say he did a great job, and kind of showing him where to go.
Yeah,
they just had the presence of mind to do that just intuitively, as you're talking about, because they're good people and they understand not only that that's something that kid needed right there, but also that that's a memory that kid's going to have forever. Like he's probably going to remember more about that interaction with those two players than anything else that happened the whole time he was doing that thing, and I think they interviewed him afterwards. And that's what he talked about was, Bergeron and Marchand said hi to me and said, great job or whatever, and they get that, like they totally understand that. And, that kind of leads me into our last sort of topic here. The next captain of the Boston Bruins, I really feel like it has to be Brad Marchand.
It has to. It absolutely has to. I've heard some Charlie McAvoy talk, and I love Charlie McAvoy, and I do think he's captain material. But
down the road. But
you have Brad Marchand. He's been the deputy captain of this team since Chara retired.
Yep.
Or since Chara left the Bruins. Marchand's been the deputy captain, as Bergeron was. And so there is no going forward without doing this. This is the best chance the Bruins have to carry on the right way, the team culture, the winning legacy, everything about the era. Brad Marchand written all over it, and he's proven himself. It's not that, well, if you don't do it, he's going to be mad. No, it's got nothing to do with that. It's got to do with him being the right guy. And this is a gimme. And for me, I don't think there's any going forward. The only way this could possibly happen is if Brad Marchand was having trouble with his injury and his comeback and decided on himself that, something, we really need to give this to Charlie or somebody or Pasta or something, because we need to, I can't be that guy. I want to be that guy, but I can't be. It would have to come from him. Otherwise, it's him. I want it to be him. If I were the Bruins and I didn't want it to be him, I'd be wondering what happened to my head, So, it's got to be Marchand.
I think down the road, 3-4 years down the line, Pasternak and McAvoy, one of them will make a fine captain. And I think those will be the two leaders of this team, the two figureheads, the two faces of the franchise. But right now, Brad Marchand, you are talking about one of the leaders and one of, the deputies for Patrice Bergeron that was a big vocal leader on this team. You're also talking about now Milan Lucic coming back. That gives them another one. But Marchand's basically the last remnant of that 2011 Stanley Cup team that's actually won anything in the playoffs. He's the guy left that knows how to win, has been to the mountaintop, and knows how to get there. Not only that, you're also talking about a guy that's probably going to be in the Hall of Fame as well. He's going to have the credentials for all of those things that Patrice Bergeron has as well.
I think in the shadow of Bergeron, it's very easy to overlook how impactful Brad Marchand has been these past several years and what that adds up to. And so, to me, there's if you're engaged and you've been following Marchand's career, then you got to understand that this guy's the captain of the Bruins right now.
100%. I think the decision's already been made, to be honest with you. I'd be surprised
Has to be.
if it hasn't. I don't even think there's an argument to be made, honestly, for anybody else at this point. I think McAvoy and Pasternak's day will come, but it's not there right now. And I think, to your point, well said, I think the best way to carry on the torch of Bergeron's legacy and in the culture of that Boston Bruins is for 63 to be the next captain of the Boston Bruins for the next couple of years. Mick, thank you for walking down memory lane with about Patrice Bergeron. It's a tough week because we all love the guy, and in this sport we don't root for teams, we do root for individuals when we're sports writers and sports reporters. And Bergeron was a guy that was eminently easy to root for because he was a humble, caring person, thoughtful, just a good human being, in addition to being an outstanding role model as a hockey player.
He loved the game. He loved the game. You could tell the way he played it. He loved it so much. And I remember his year after that concussion, how the players in the summer were trying to get him off the ice, because he'd spent so much time out there. But that translated. I think that affected the Bruins, and I think that helped the Bruins, and that's going to be missed.
So thank you, Patrice Bergeron, for everything. I want to thank our sponsors really quick too. FanDuel Sportsbook, the official exclusive wagering partner of the CLNS network, and also Factor Meals, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal kit. Ready in 2 minutes. Like I said, I ate the lunch today, Indian butter chicken. It was fantastic. So thank you, Factor Meals. Mick, thank you very much for being on again to talk about Bergie today. Thanks for listening, guys, and we'll see you at the rink.